Hey, nice to have you with us. It's Friday. That means it's our time on Mansfield Today, where we take a look at property. And in this particular case, we're going to be going offshore. Our guest in the studio is the head of South Africa for a company called IP Global, Tom Bland. Tom, nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me, Jeremy.
There's been a lot of talk about offshore investments, specifically in the property market. What's happening in that market at the moment? Because that's your speciality.
That's all we do, absolutely. I think there are two main dynamics that come into play from a South African perspective. Firstly, the fact that South Africans like property as an asset class. Mm-hmm. And secondly, is South Africans are worried about the performance of their investments in South Africa, both the performance but also what's happening with regards to the rand and how the rand is fluctuating and generally weakening against other currencies. So for a lot of South African investors, there's a huge benefit of both getting money offshore, mm-hmm. and therefore having a currency hedge. So once you get your money offshore, the big concern is where do you invest that money? Putting in a bank with interest rates at an all-time low, you're not going to get any return there. You can look at other areas to put it in. For example, obviously the stock market would be the obvious choice, but there is a concern of where stocks are going and the performance thereof. So property just seems to be an ideal asset class for South Africans to invest in. Obviously, the important thing is to look at the asset class itself, look at the risk profile, the length of time, the liquidity. There are a lot of different factors that you've got to take into account when investing in property. But generally speaking, South Africans will benefit from both a currency hedge and also being in an asset class which has performed over the years very well.
Okay, let's break this down now then. If you are thinking of looking at property offshore, obviously one of the things is going to be budget. Sure. Because you need to know how much you have Absolutely. Got and how much it's going to translate into euros or pounds or dollars or whatever you're buying in. But what other things do you need to look for? It's all very well buying another house in the same city you live in, or even in the same country you live in. But when you're going over to another country, where they may be speaking another language, it's a bit of a different story, isn't
Absolutely. And it's a very good point, Jeremy. I mean, the simple fact is the way IP Global, the way our business model works, is first and foremost, we look at tier one safe haven countries. And what we mean by that is we're looking at countries which have a growing and diverse economy, that have a very transparent and strong legal system where foreigners have ownership rights are well protected, and also at countries where clients are going to be able to investors are going to be able to get financing on their property. Because one of the huge benefits about direct property investment is the ability to leverage that asset. And what that means is ultimately with the low interest rates, as we know we're going through at the moment, you're able to get very cheap finance, which has a direct effect and a very positive effect on your internal rate of return, or some people refer to as your return on equity. So what you're able to do is you're able to borrow a huge chunk of the purchase price, and therefore you're putting less capital in. But you're absolutely right. What you want to look at is a budget. You want to make sure that you are investing in the right countries with, this pandemic has showed us that, when you look at other places, if you're not looking purely from an investment point of view, people that have looked at Mauritius or Caribbean islands or some other countries, smaller countries in the Eastern Europe, their economies are so small and so narrow that unfortunately the pandemic has had a huge effect on the performance of property market in those countries. Whereas what we've seen with the locations in which IP Global have offerings, the UK, Portugal, Germany, and historically we had a lot in Australia and America, that these countries and the cities within these countries are very strong. They have strong, diverse economies that are future-proof, so they embracing the tech side of things, and this has enabled property to perform very well, especially residential property, out of all the various sectors of property within that asset class.
But I mean, now, once you've gone through that whole exercise and you say, for example, I say, okay, I want to invest in the UK because it's in a language I understand and speak. Even within those countries, there are nodes of areas which are developing and which are, it's predicted, are going to show good returns. So you've then got to start drilling even further down into that.
You do, but I would come back to the initial point you made there, is where you want to invest. You know, when you go and you speak to your wealth advisor, you don't tell him where to invest your money. And that's why people like IP Global exist, because the basis of our business model is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, looking at tier one safe haven countries, but then it's about the amount of research and due diligence we do. So we're all about figuring out where the best opportunities lie and putting an investment case together. So we're looking at major factors. It always comes down to supply and demand, but there are other factors that will have a huge influence on how well or a certain market will perform, not just now but going forward. Things like the population growth, job opportunities, connectivity, and all these different factors. So it's often you find, and especially South Africans, they tend to go to the UK as their number one choice. Yes, because of the language, but also because a lot of them would have lived there at some point. But, I would take the approach of speak to a professional, and as you mentioned earlier, what is the budget? What are your timings? Mm-hmm. Some people, for example, leveraging wise, how much do you want to borrow? And from that, we'll be able to point you in the right direction as to what we believe is the best opportunity. Because some of our opportunities will be, they're all going to be a combination of capital growth and rental yield, but some may be more of a rental yield than a capital growth and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So if you've got someone who's, in their late 50s, early 60s, who's looking for an income from that property, obviously then we're going to look at the areas and cities within, the UK or Germany or Portugal that offer higher yields but still stable growth.
Right. And vice versa, if the person is 35 years old, you're going to go for capital.
Absolutely. And also just to be, fully aware of the fact that, property, if treated as a medium to long-term investment, which it should be, would therefore be viewed as a low to medium risk asset class. So you need to understand that when you go into any investment, so it doesn't have, be it property or anything else, you need to understand what the term, the likely length of your investment is going to be, what the liquidity is like. So if you're going to need that money anytime soon, then property is probably not the asset class that you really want to invest in, because it's not nearly as liquid as, for example, buying shares or gold or something along those lines.
Yeah. If people are wanting to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way? Have you got a website that you can...
Absolutely. So the website is www.ipglobal-ltd.com. And to get a hold of me, either by email is tom.bland@ipglobal-ltd.com, or probably best on the mobile, which is 071 957 4410.
Tom Bland, head of IP Global in South Africa, thank you very much for joining us on Mansfield today.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
That wraps it up for this Friday's property section. We'll catch you next Friday again with another view and another look at property right here on Mansfield Today. If you did like the show, then press the like button. If you'd like to subscribe, then press the subscribe button. Till next time, cherry bye.